Hi, everyone. Welcome to Platformatic's V1 launch Q&A. I'm here with our co-founders, Luca Maraschi and Matteo Collina, and they're going to be answering a few questions that you've submitted to us. So let's start out with the first question that we got, which is, why should someone use Platformatic Client instead of established solutions or other SDK solutions that are currently on the market?
The critical reason for using Platformatic Client. When you are looking at a client solution for calling for microservice to microservice communication, okay, you need to think of how that client would fit into the network of microservices. And there are a few things that needs to be moved through when you do those calls between microservices. There is a lot of contextual context. There is a context that is attached to the request, and you want to move that context from the source from the caller, your caller, to the callee, to the next microservice, and you want to move it through. Okay, you want to move it through at each step. When down the line, you want to forward those headers like authentication, authorization, the original IP address of the user that is being moved around. Other very important metadata, the WAF. There is a lot of things that get added on the original headers that are very important to move through. Platformatic Client it's integrated in the Fastify lifecycle. You get a decorator on the Fastify instance that move all of these around. So you don't need to, you set it up and all those things are getting managed for you. You set it up centrally and all those things are getting managed for you automatically. And you don't need to really think about doing them. So that is, in all intents and purposes, the most important one. The other bit is the full Platformatic Client is built on top of the Undici library, which is essentially the replacement that the Node Core team is developing for replacing HTTP.request, which everybody is currently using elsewhere in all the other implementation. It's extraordinarily fast. For example, if you are looking for a solution that's based on fetch or something like that, you can see the benchmark that are published on the Undici page, and this should show more or less the core. But the key part, this is where the future is adding. And there is also the full-blown end-to-end integration with Fastify, which we see that it was missing in the ecosystem. There is also a bunch of other stuff, like, for example, support for OpenTelemetry if you want it, and a lot of other stuff that's needed. Also we can also do validation of request and response data, so that if there is a change in the microservice, we can detect that on the fly. A lot of other stuff like that are can be very useful for teams. Essentially, it is developed for a machine-to-machine communication, and not, for example, from front-end to back-end communication, where, for example, the size of the clients matter or something like that.
Fantastic. All right. As part of our V1 launch, we launched a feature called Stackables. And Stackables basically take all of your configurations, they package them into shareable modules, and you can publish them on your internal NPM registry. So we received a question about Stackables. And the question is, what would be a typical use case for adopting Stackables in an organization?
I think we briefly kind of like mentioned, right? Historically, organizations has been scaling on people and technologies using, for example, starter kits until now. And that's where we think the next evolution is Stackables. But the typical use case is, imagine an enterprise with a number of teams, 1, 10, 100 teams, with developers that they need to all develop what are so-called usually outcomes. So Stackables are fitting the enablement side, basically providing a foundation for all these teams to build consistently and with the correct bootstrapping, with the correct configurations, basically with an out-of-the-box experience for them to deliver value to the market and to their users. So the use case, once again, going back to a practical, is building the foundation, for example, of an API ecosystem. If you think about the so-called API strategy, to have all these APIs built exactly in the same way with the same foundation. This is the initial kind of like use case where you see the value. Or in a platform team, having different teams building different pieces that they would be all combined together into that foundation for the enablement team. So imagine one authentication team, telemetry team, the data connection team, building their own individual component, putting them together, and delivering this nice block as a foundation team.
Something that is very useful and very important to consider is the update lifecycle. So having all of that packaged up is in a module on your private NPM registry will allow you a much more tight control on what dependencies are running, on the security of said dependencies, and the fact that you could even monitor how your fleet of services contains that is using that system, and also roll out updates so that you don't need to chase down people to get everything aligned. So it's way simpler, the whole the management and dependency management system story with this kind of technology.
Perfect.
And that's
Thank
more coming, clearly.
Oh, well, yeah, of course there is more coming. Okay, I'm not, this is, stay tuned. We are launching something new very soon. So, stay tuned. We'll get something done in this space very soon. So.
Amazing. All right. And we also launched the breaking change detector, which offers a view of the impact that a change will have on the public API level of your microservice ecosystem. And we got a question about the breaking change detector. So we were asked, how would you recommend using the breaking change detector in a large company with several applications where each team maintains a different application?
I'm taking this, Luca, if you don't mind. So the breaking change detector use open telemetry data. Okay, if your system or application produces open telemetry tracing data, we can receive it. Okay, so you can take your most of the application now can be configured to emit that. There are agents for all sorts of languages, either Java, .NET. Everything can produce open tracing, open telemetry metadata. So we implement our breaking change detector. Our collector implement the standard API from the open telemetry spec, which means that we can now use all those clients, all those agents are compatible with the breaking change detector. And by funneling all that data to our system, we can now assemble it, even though you're only using Platformatic for a part or even nothing of your infrastructure, and the breaking change, or only for the breaking change, essentially, detector. If you're just using it for that, it will also be possible for you to use it in that. It's also available to all our users in the cloud. So
Not only, I mean, if you think, just to add to that, it's a scaling problem, right? The breaking detector solves a fundamental problem that was never addressed before, that is removing what we call the developer anxiety, right? Of deploying faster. We heard Facebook a long time ago saying move fast and break things, but in many enterprises, in many organizations, breaking things is not an option, and it shouldn't be an option, to be very honest. And we believe that there is an intersection between moving fast and not breaking things with the correct system that allows you to kind of like assess ahead of time, right, the risk of taking down a distributed system. And we mentioned several times the microservices revolution, if you want to name it in that way, brought to the enterprise itself, the concept of distributed development and distributed system on a minor scale than what you can think Uber or Netflix or other large companies are doing. But the problem is exactly the same, is the coordination. And we are kind of like removing that step from the developers table and from the managers trouble and watchguard, and say, we allow you to integrate directly with your day-to-day development and allow you to develop as fast as you want, to deploy as fast as you want, but knowing something is going to break at least before it does. It's like going to the dentist. You should go every 6 months to avoid to feel the pain of a cavity later on.
Excellent. All right, the two of you got a bit ahead of me, and you alluded to this earlier on, but our last question is, what's coming next for Platformatic and your features?
While we cannot really give the insights of where we are going, we can give an idea of how pieces are coming together, right? We are committed to continuously bring features at the speed that we have been doing in the past few months. The next big release is going to be for sure, let's say before the end of the year. It might be in Santa's bag. And we are actually kind of like taking a step forward with the features that we announced this week. So we are evolving the concept of Stackables to a place where we believe it will drive much more value to organization and individual developers. We'll try to converge these two spaces. And in terms of like we mentioned right now, the so-called developer anxiety, right? This fear of moving fast, and there are many things that can be solved in this journey, and we will aim to try to continue on that path. That doesn't really kind of like even address the enormous amount of open source that we are constantly delivering, and we will continue on that path. So we are keeping it a little bit under the radar, but it's very exciting to see when all the dots are coming together and finally you see a picture. It's like those children books, right? When you need to connect all the dots, and now finally they come together and you realize what we are drawing.
Fantastic. That is the end of our Q&A. If you haven't yet checked out our new features, be sure to go to platformatic.dev. There you'll be able to see everything about breaking change detector, everything about Stackables. You'll also be able to sign up to our newsletter to get up-to-date news on all of our new releases when that comes out. And you'll also be able to watch the demos that Matteo has recorded on our new features that are on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.